I mistook familiarity for comfort. I lived in the same city for 9 years. I had not chosen it particularly. I had arrived for a job, the job had become other jobs, the city had become the background against which everything else happened. I knew where things were. I knew the routes, the neighborhoods, the particular quality of light in different seasons, the way the transit system behaved at different times of day. I knew which places to avoid and which to return to. I knew how to live there in the minimal friction way that comes from long exposure to a place. I described this knowledge to myself as comfort, as belonging, as evidence that I was in the right place. The fluency I had developed, the ease of movement, the absence of the constant low-level effort that comes with an unfamiliar environment, I was reading as contentment. This reading was wrong, and it took me a long time to identify precisely how it was wrong. Ray had lived in the same city when I arrived. We had been close for most of the 9 years, the kind of friendship built through proximity and accumulated shared experience, where the other person's presence in your life has become as ordinary and necessary as any piece of the landscape. Then Ray left. A deliberate decision, planned over months, executed with a clarity I found hard to watch because it implied a level of self-knowledge I did not feel myself to have. She moved somewhere she had no existing network, no established routes, no automatic knowledge of how things worked. She started the particular labor of building a life in an unfamiliar place, the effort, the disorientation, the slow accumulation of new knowledge. Over the following year, I watched this from a distance. We spoke regularly. What I noticed, and tried, at first, not to notice, was a quality in her that had not been present before. Not happiness in a simple sense. Something more specific. An aliveness. A particular quality of engagement with her own daily experience that I did not have and that I recognized I had not had for some time. She was describing things with attention and curiosity. She was making choices with a sense of consequence. She was encountering things as new rather than processing them automatically. I was not doing any of those things. I was moving through my days with competence and minimal friction, and I had been calling that contentment. The distinction I eventually found, and it required real effort to find it, because the feelings are similar enough on the surface to be easily conflated, is that familiarity produces its own feeling, and that feeling is not the same as satisfaction, even though both involve the absence of discomfort. Contentment, in its genuine form, comes from engagement with something that is actively good for you. The absence of friction there reflects fit, the fit between what you are doing and what you actually want. Familiarity, by contrast, produces the absence of friction through the removal of the effort required to process the new. Nothing is surprising, so nothing requires the cognitive work of interpretation. The brain runs on established patterns. The result is a smooth, low-effort experience of daily life that can feel, from inside it, like everything is fine. The diagnostic question, and this is the one I could not easily answer when I applied it to myself, is whether the feeling comes from something being right or from the absence of anything obviously wrong. Contentment and familiarity both feel like quiet. But one is the quiet of a life that fits, and the other is the quiet of a life that has become automatic. I had been in the automatic quiet for somewhere between 3 and 5 years without recognizing it as such. The city was familiar. The routine was established. The social context was navigable without effort. Everything was manageable. Nothing felt alive. I had normalized the absence of aliveness as the way adult life felt. I thought this was maturity, the replacement of youthful intensity with a more sustainable, moderate engagement. Ray's life, seen from the outside, suggested a different possibility, that the intensity she had was not youth and could not simply be attributed to novelty. It was the result of having chosen something that actively required her to be present, rather than something she could navigate on autopilot. I left 2 years after Ray did. Not to the same place, to a different one, chosen more deliberately than the original city had been chosen, with attention to what I actually wanted from an environment rather than what I had been told was practical or sensible. The first months were the labor I had watched Ray perform, the disorientation, the effort required to process what was unfamiliar, the absence of automatic knowledge. It was harder than the city I had left in every measurable practical sense. Things took longer. Navigation required attention. The social context had to be built from nothing. The ease was gone. What replaced the ease was not comfort in the familiar sense. It was something more like presence. The requirement to actually pay attention, because nothing could be processed automatically, meant that I was more consistently inside my own experience than I had been for years. Not pleasantly inside it at every moment. But there. That there-ness was what I had been missing and had not had a name for. I had been physically present in my previous life while being experientially absent from it. The familiarity had been doing the living for me, running the days on pattern, and I had confused the smoothness of that process with the feeling of a life that fit. The distinction matters because familiarity is always available. You can always stay where things are known. And the known place will always feel, at some level, like the right place, not because it is, but because the nervous system experiences the absence of friction as safety and registers safety as rightness. It is a shortcut that bypasses the question of whether the place is actually good. The question requires an effort the shortcut is specifically designed to avoid. Ray asked me, once, after I had been in the new city for about 8 months, how it felt to have left. I said it felt like I had turned on a light in a room I had been navigating in the dark for years. The room had not changed. I had always been in it. But I had been finding my way by memory, and I had stopped noticing that I could not actually see. That is familiarity. The memory of the room, good enough to navigate by, mistaken for the room itself. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable. It builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.